Hey there, seekers of the strange and keepers of curiosity. Welcome back to Broadcasting Seeds, where we plant the little kernels of truth that just might grow into trees of wonder, or maybe just mess up your mental garden for good. I'm your host, Bennett Tanton, your trusty guide on this deep dive into the weird, the wild, and the downright mystical. Today, we're taking a sleigh ride back in time, way before your grandma was crocheting stockings by the fire. We're going back to the dark, snowy landscapes of the Norse world to unpack one of the most fascinating and misunderstood traditions in history, Yule. That's right. Today's episode is all about the 12 Days of Yule, Nordic mysticism and rituals. Now, you might be thinking, wait, Bennett, isn't that just the OG version of the 12 Days of Christmas? Well, yes and no. Sure, Yule inspired some of our modern holiday traditions, but the Norse weren't exactly caroling about partridges and pear trees. This was a season of death, rebirth, sacrifices, fire magic, and maybe even a ghostly ride through the sky led by Odin himself. Yeah, not exactly Hallmark material. Here's the deal. Yule wasn't just a feel-good winter solstice party. It was a time of powerful rituals, intense beliefs, and supernatural connections. From lighting the Yule log to offering sacrifices to the gods and divining the future with runes, every act was dripping with meaning. And let's not forget the wild hunt. Yes, that wild hunt we covered in an earlier episode. Spoiler, it's back, and it's Odin-level epic. So grab a cup of something warm, preferably spiked because this is going to get deep, and settle in as we unravel the mystery of Yule, one magical thread at a time. I'll break this down into 5 sections so we can really sink our teeth into the meat of it, Viking style. Oh, and just a heads up, some of the things we're about to cover, like the wild hunt, have been expanded on in our 12 Days of Christmas series episodes, so you might want to check those out after this one. For now, though, let's set sail on this Yule tide. Let's kick this off with a bit of history, and trust me, this isn't the dry, snooze-worthy kind you got in high school. Yule, or Joel as the Norse called it, was the centerpiece of their winter calendar. It wasn't a single night or even a weekend bash. Nope. Yule was a season, lasting for 12 days, starting around the winter solstice, the darkest day of the year. Imagine your holiday season, but swap out the gift-giving and cheesy movies for bonfires, sacrifices, and epic feasts where everyone hoped they'd live long enough to see spring. Good times, right? The roots of Yule run deep, like this might be older than Odin himself, deep. The festival was about survival and reverence. For the Norse, winter wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a test of endurance. If you made it through alive, it was worth celebrating. And what better way to celebrate than by gathering your clan, lighting massive fires, and invoking the gods to ensure you didn't keel over before the snow melted. Now, before we dive into the nuts and bolts of Yule rituals, let's address the elephant, or should I say reindeer, in the room. How did this Norse festival morph into the jolly, gift-wrapped 12 Days of Christmas we know today? Well, as Christianity spread through Europe, early missionaries had a knack for taking pagan festivals and giving them a Christian makeover. They saw how deeply rooted Yule was in the culture and figured, if you can't beat 'em, rebrand 'em. Suddenly, Odin's ghostly rides became stories about Saint Nick, and Yule logs were burned in the name of baby Jesus. But here's the thing. They couldn't scrub out all the old magic. The echoes of Yule still hum through our holiday traditions. The Christmas tree? That's basically a Yule tree, the big holiday feast, straight out of the Norse playbook. Even Santa Claus, with his long beard and sleigh, has shades of Odin leading his wild hunt across the winter skies. So while you're decking the halls or binge-eating cookies this holiday season, just remember, you're channeling your inner Viking. And honestly, that's a vibe we should all embrace. Next up, we'll dive into the fiery heart of Yule, quite literally, with the symbolism and rituals of the Yule log. Let's talk fire. Yule wasn't Yule without a roaring blaze, and at the center of it all was the legendary Yule log. Now, before you picture some little decorative thing you buy at the store, let me set the record straight. The Norse didn't mess around. This was a log, people. A tree trunk, if we're being honest. It was meant to burn for the entire 12 days of Yule, and lighting it was no casual affair. This was a sacred act, loaded with meaning. The Yule log symbolized life, warmth, and renewal in the darkest time of the year. The Norse believed fire wasn't just a source of heat. It was transformative, a connection to the divine. Lighting the log was a way to push back against the darkness, both literal and spiritual, and to honor the gods who govern the forces of nature. But it wasn't just about throwing wood on the fire and hoping for the best. The lighting of the Yule log was often accompanied by rituals, prayers, and even spells. Families would inscribe runes on the log for protection, prosperity, or fertility. Some accounts suggest they would sprinkle it with ale or mead as an offering, because even the gods appreciate a good drink. And here's where it gets interesting. The ashes from the Yule log weren't just tossed out after the fire died down. They were carefully collected and kept as powerful talismans. People believed those ashes held protective magic, capable of warding off evil spirits, ensuring a good harvest, and even safeguarding their homes from lightning strikes. In a way, the Yule log was like a magical battery charged with the energy of the solstice and the prayers of those gathered around it. Now, you might be wondering, how does this tie into modern traditions? Ever heard of the phrase, burning the midnight oil? That idea of keeping a light burning through the longest, darkest nights has its roots in Yule. And while most of us don't set giant logs ablaze in our living rooms anymore, because, fire codes, the spirit of the Yule log lives on in the cozy, glowing fireplaces and even those little chocolate Yule log cakes. But here's the kicker. The fire wasn't just about warmth or even magic. It was a beacon, a signal to the gods and ancestors that their offerings were being made and their blessings were welcome. It was also a reminder to the community that even in the darkest times, the light could and would return. Speaking of offerings, that brings us to the next layer of Yule tradition, sacrifices and feasts. If you think holiday feasts are all about eating until your waistband screams for mercy, the Norse would like a word. For them, feasting during Yule wasn't just about survival, it was a sacred act. And before the first horn of mead was raised or the roast boar hit the table, sacrifices or blóts were offered to ensure the gods' favor. Let's dig into the deliciously dark side of Yule celebrations. In Norse culture, sacrifices were deeply symbolic. These weren't random acts of bloodshed. They were offerings meant to honor the gods, spirits, and ancestors. Animals like goats, pigs, and cattle were commonly sacrificed, their blood collected and used to bless altars, tools, and even the participants themselves. Yeah, you could say things got a little messy, but in a holy way. The idea was simple. Give something valuable to show gratitude and secure the gods' protection through the brutal winter months. And then came the feast. Nothing went to waste. Meat from the sacrificed animals was cooked and shared by the community. This wasn't just a meal. It was a way to unite everyone under the same purpose: survival and renewal. Imagine sitting around a long wooden table in a smoky hall, the air thick with the smell of roasting meat, firelight flickering against carved beams, and voices raised in songs and toasts to Odin, Thor, and Freyr. That's the heart of Yule. But it wasn't just the gods who got offerings. Ancestors played a big role too. The Norse believed that the spirits of their forebears lingered, watching over their descendants. Yule was a time to honor these spirits by setting aside a portion of the meal for them. This might be as simple as leaving a bit of meat or bread on the hearth, but the meaning was profound, a reminder that the past and present were connected, and that those who came before still held a place at the table. Now let's talk about the feast itself. Boar was a big deal during Yule, often roasted and served as the centerpiece of the meal. This ties back to the god Freyr, who was associated with fertility, prosperity, and, oddly enough, a magical golden bristled boar named Gulenbursti. Toasts were made to the gods, ancestors, and even the king or chieftain, with everyone drinking deeply from horns of mead or ale. Side note, if you didn't toast, you were basically asking for bad luck. The Norse didn't do half measures when it came to their rituals, and just when you think they'd call it a night, the feasting often turned into storytelling sessions. This was when tales of gods, heroes, and supernatural events were shared. These stories weren't just entertainment. They were lessons, history, and a way to pass on the values of the culture. So next time you're swapping stories around a holiday dinner table, remember you're keeping a tradition alive that's as old as the sagas. But Yule wasn't just about eating, drinking, and honoring the gods. It was also a time for peering into the unknown, for divination and magic. Ready to explore the mystical side of Yule? The Norses didn't just light fires and toast the gods during Yule. They leaned heavily into the mystical side of things. Yule wasn't just a party, it was a time when the veil between worlds thinned, making it the perfect season for magic and divination. If you've ever wished you could peek into the future or wield ancient symbols of power, this is your segment. Runes played a huge role during Yule. These weren't just cool-looking letters carved into stone or wood. They were sacred symbols tied to the gods, particularly Odin. According to myth, Odin hung himself from Yggdrasil, the world tree, for 9 days and nights to unlock the secrets of the runes. Talk about commitment. Each rune held a specific meaning and power, and during Yule, people used them for guidance and protection. Divination rituals often involved casting runes or carving them into objects like Yule logs, candles, or even food. The symbols could reveal everything, from the fate of the coming year to which crops would thrive in the spring. It wasn't just about reading the future, though. It was about aligning oneself with the will of the gods and the forces of nature. Yule also marked a time when the Norns, the Norse equivalents of the Fates, were believed to be particularly active. These three mysterious beings wove the threads of destiny at the base of Yggdrasil, determining the past, present, and future of every living thing. During Yule, people sought their favor, or at least tried to decode the patterns they wove. And then there's the solstice itself. The longest night of the year was a liminal time, a moment when the ordinary rules of reality seemed to loosen. It wasn't uncommon for people to perform rituals or chants to draw on this heightened energy. Some accounts suggest that people would walk around their homes or fields with torches to ward off evil spirits and ensure prosperity for the coming year. The idea was simple. If the forces of darkness were going to be active, you'd better come prepared. Let's not forget about dreams. Yule was considered a powerful time for prophetic dreams, and people often placed runes, charms, or offerings under their pillows to invite visions. Think of it as the Viking version of journaling your intentions for the new year, except with way more magic and maybe a little less Instagram. Now, here's a fun twist. Some of these practices might sound familiar because they've trickled into modern traditions. Ever burned a candle while making a wish or drawn a random card from a deck to see what your day has in store? You're participating in rituals that echo these ancient Yule practices. Pretty wild, huh? But while the magic of Yule was largely about hope and renewal, there was also a darker, wilder side to this season. It's time to revisit the legendary Wild Hunt and its spectral leader, Odin. Now, if there's one part of Yule that really brings the supernatural chills, it's the Wild Hunt. We touched on this in a previous episode of the 12 Days of Christmas series, but today, we're going deeper into this bone-chilling legend that's as much a part of Yule as feasts and firelight. The Wild Hunt is one of the most enduring and eerie myths of the Norse tradition. Picture this: a ghostly procession tearing across the winter sky, led by none other than Odin himself. This wasn't just a joyride through the heavens. The hunt was believed to sweep up the lost, the wicked, and the unwary. Those caught outdoors when the hunt passed might find themselves whisked away to the realm of the dead, or worse. Odin, in his guise as the Allfather and Psychopomp, guide of souls, was the head honcho of this spectral event. He was often depicted riding Sleipnir, his 8-legged horse, with a host of warriors, spectral hounds, and restless spirits in tow. The sound of howling winds during a Yule night, that wasn't just weather. It was said to be the harbinger of the hunt. And trust me, you didn't want to be the one hearing it. But the Wild Hunt wasn't all bad. Like most myths, it had dual meanings. While it could spell doom for the unlucky, it also symbolized the cleansing of the old to make way for the new. The hunt's passage was believed to sweep the land of stagnation and evil, clearing the way for renewal with the return of the sun. Think of it as the supernatural equivalent of taking out the trash, if the trash included malevolent spirits and bad vibes. So how did people protect themselves during this perilous time? One way was to stay inside and keep a fire burning. The light and warmth were thought to repel the spirits of the hunt. Some families left offerings like ale or food on their doorsteps to appease Odin and his horde. Others carved protective runes on their doors or gates to keep the supernatural at bay. This wasn't just superstition, it was survival. The hunt also tied into the Norse belief in omens and portents. If someone witnessed the Wild Hunt, it could mean anything from a bountiful year ahead to impending death or disaster. The key was interpreting what you saw and acting accordingly. This brings us full circle to the Yule season as a time of divination and connection with forces beyond the mortal realm. Now here's where it gets interesting. Elements of the Wild Hunt made their way into folklore across Europe. In Germany, it became Der wilde Jagd. In England, it was linked to Herne the Hunter or even King Arthur. And in modern Christmas lore, some scholars argue that Odin's ghostly ride inspired Santa's sleigh, though the reindeer are definitely less terrifying than Sleipnir and a pack of spectral wolves. So the next time you hear the wind howl on a dark winter night, think of the Norsemen, huddled around their fires, listening for the distant thunder of hooves. Was it just the storm, or was it Odin and his hunters? The line between myth and reality gets awfully thin during Yule. With the wild hunt roaring through the skies, we've rounded out our exploration of Yule. Now it's time to bring this episode home and reflect on what this ancient festival still has to teach us today. And that, my friends, wraps up this deep dive into the mystical, magical, and downright epic 12 Days of Yule. From blazing fires and hearty feasts to rune-carved spells and Odin's ghostly wild hunt, Yule was so much more than a simple winter celebration. It was a time to honor the cycles of life and death, connect with the divine, and maybe even glimpse the threads of fate woven by forces beyond our understanding. So what does this mean for us today? Well, Yule reminds us of the power of tradition, the importance of community, and the need to find light even in the darkest times. Whether you're carving runes, lighting a candle, or just enjoying a quiet moment by the fire, you're tapping into something ancient, something timeless, and maybe, just maybe, you're keeping a little piece of that Viking spirit alive. If you enjoyed this episode, do me a favor. Hit that like button, share this with your fellow seekers of the strange, and leave a review. Your support helps Broadcasting Seeds grow, one curious mind at a time. Got thoughts, questions, or your own Yule-inspired stories? Drop me a message. I'd love to hear them. Until next time, keep your fires burning bright and your ears open for the howl of the wind. You never know. It might just be Odin himself, reminding us that the line between myth and reality is thinner than we think. Stay curious, stay bold, and I'll see you on the next episode of Broadcasting Seeds.
I got bad thoughts that make my mind scared, hold me hostage and they don't fight fair. Who gon' pray for me and wipe on my tears? Who gon' save me if you not right here? Move this darkness and make my sight clear. Take me your way cause I don't like here. Ghosts of my past, they feeling the night air. Wake me up, I'm trapped in my nightmares. Wake me up, I'm trapped in my nightmares. Drowning, I'm off the deep end. Apparitions of all my demons. All my thoughts are committing treason. All alone, who gon' hear me screaming? Manifestations of my fears. Regrets that stretched out for light years. Can almost touch the light, homie, it's right there. Body free but trapped in my nightmares. Wake me up, don't let me drown. All the lights are fading now. All my life is fading.